My name is Arielle Cohen, National Organizer with Bend the Arc, and I am speaking on behalf of members of Some of Us. I'm presenting Shareholder Proposal 12. Our proposal requests that the Board of Directors begin an orderly process of retaining advisors for strategic alternatives to the current corporate structure, including a breakup of Facebook, Inc., and an empowered committee of independent directors to evaluate those alternatives in exercise of their fiduciary responsibilities to maximize shareholder value. We believe that Facebook is out of control. It is too large and too complex to be managed effectively. We're sick and tired of apologies as privacy and the safeties of our families and communities is repeatedly violated, as hate is inflamed and as democracy undermined by the myriad interconnected monopolies that comprise Facebook, Inc. Facebook has enabled the spread of incendiary fake news and violent extremist content that sways elections, triggers mass shootings, and sparks genocide. Facebook shareholders have suffered the regulatory fines and actions as only the beginning, and this continues to pile up. Shareholders need to make Facebook more manageable and Facebook's management more accountable. Our proposal is not prescriptive as to which strategic alternative should be pursued, but Facebook founder Chris Hughes laid out a recommended strategic alternative in his May 9th New York Times op-ed. Facebook would have a brief period to spin off Instagram and WhatsApp businesses, and the three would become distinct companies, most likely publicly traded. Facebook shareholders would initially hold stock in the new companies, and although Mark and other executives would probably be required to divest their management shares. I think it's easy to understand that this is a business imperative, but I want you to know why it's a moral imperative. Last October, on a quiet morning, I got a text from a childhood friend that made no sense at first. She asked, "Are you okay?" She then went on to explain that there had been a mass shooting at the Tree of Life, the synagogue by my home, and that housed so much of my beloved Pittsburgh Jewish community. The next 48 hours were a terrifying blur, and I frantically tried to track down friends and loved ones who may have been at services that Saturday morning at the synagogue. As the hours wore on, the horrific details grew clear. A white nationalist had murdered 11 members of my community as they prayed. He, like so many others, had been radicalized on social media. In the days that followed, my deep mourning gave way to a renewed fear. I have been an outspoken community organizer for years, and as a Jewish woman fighting for social and economic justice, I knew that white nationalists, grotesquely emboldened by this massacre, would begin targeting people like me for abuse and worse. I found that friends of mine were known to the shooter by name and were callously mocked in this community. And this community online had metastasized into a cell of white nationalist terror. I was forced to find and block hundreds of white nationalist accounts on Facebook and Twitter to protect my safety. Facebook has played a huge role in spreading the far-right hatred that devastated communities like mine, but I refuse to allow this failure of due diligence to force me into hiding. I believe that leadership means living a powerful, principled public life. And it's not just Pittsburgh. In Charlottesville, a neo-Nazi who murdered Heather Hare injured dozens of protesters shared white supremacist memes on Facebook before the attack. The Christchurch terrorist who massacred 50 Muslims as they worship live-streamed his crimes on Facebook. 300,000 versions of this video made it through Facebook's filters. And despite April's ban on white nationalist content, a recent investigation found that hundreds of far-right pages with millions of followers continue to operate openly, spreading the hatred that so often spills into fatal violence. Facebook itself has committed anti-Semitic and racist and sexist acts. Sheryl Sandberg hired Republican-backed PR firm Definers Public Affairs to publicly target George Soros after Soros rightfully criticized Facebook's business model. These smears against Soros fed into venomous anti-Semitic conspiracies popular with the far right and neo-Nazis. Facebook claims this incident is resolved, but it has failed to demonstrate the culture change that would stop such a scandal in the future. Shareholders know that the board of directors is accountable for failing to rein in management and allowing these terrible events to occur. We know that our company's dual class structure gives Mark Zuckerberg voting control but regulators and elected officials around the world are calling for Facebook to be regulated and broken up because the company's shoddy record and its monopoly power. It's up to the board to move forward and study alternatives to the current configuration that will give shareholders the most value and will to manage the company in a way that minimizes legal, regulatory, and political risk and that have borne in my community. Lastly, I am a millennial, and while I call Pittsburgh my home and have for the last 6 years, Facebook is in many ways my neighborhood. I grew up online. Under the direction of Zuckerberg and Sandberg, my neighborhood, Facebook, has become unsafe, fostering communities of violence online and off. I urge shareholders to support our proposal. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for sharing your story. I just want to take a brief moment to acknowledge that the horrific events that took place in Pittsburgh and Christchurch and too many places around the world this past year were acts of pure evil. My heart goes out to you and to everyone in the communities that were impacted by these events. I'm sorry for these things that have happened, and we're in keeping with that. We're committed to doing all we can to curb extremism and hate speech online. These things don't have any place on our services. We don't allow people to attack based on national origin, gender, religious affiliation, and we remove this content as soon as we become aware of it. So we're aligned on these things.